What do you study?
I'm a professor.
You're a professor. Oh my God, a real professor.
Not real one, but
I don't think.
I'd like to be one.
In what area?
So I have theory, probability.
Okay.
We have a group of students here. We came from Croatia.
Oh, okay, great.
To visit MIT and listen to their lectures.
Okay, great.
I'm ready whenever you are.
So, howdy everyone.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and get started.
No pressure.
So, thanks everyone for coming to tonight's entry in the Vannevar Bush Lecture Series for Science and Technology Innovation. My name is Jack Reed. I'm the Special Events Coordinator for the Science Policy Initiative, a graduate student-run group here at MIT. In addition to SPI, this series is generously supported by the Leading Technology Policy Initiative, a fund that supports events like this. You can thank them for the refreshments today. Tonight, or I guess today, since we're starting earlier for this one, is Professor Bill Aulet. Professor Aulet is the Managing Director of the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship and a Professor of Practice at Sloan. He has significant experience, industry experience, both at IBM and as an independent entrepreneur. And today he'll be talking to us about how entrepreneurship can drive innovation. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. So I don't know who you all are. I know some of you, but how many of you are faculty here? So some of you are faculty in some place.
Yes.
What department?
I'm coming from Arizona, and I teach the MBA program there.
Fantastic. So you teach, what is your area of specialty? Strategy?
Operations management.
Operations management. Who else? So what are the rest of you? PhDs? From what course?
I'm an assistant professor.
Oh, in what course? 15? In what?
Visiting from the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. What course?
Mechanical engineering.
Okay. Mechanical engineering. And the rest of you are what? Graduates? Yes?
Students from Croatia.
Okay. How many of you are from Croatia? A lot.
Majority.
Thank you, Croatia. We might not have a talk otherwise. All right, so look, I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship and what it takes to be an entrepreneur, some of the myths, and then what we can do to teach entrepreneurship and make entrepreneurship more prevalent in our society and why that's important. So entrepreneurship can be taught. It should be taught, and we can do it. Everyone in this room could do it. Everyone in any room can do it. I'll talk more about that, and I'm going to talk mostly about how do we do it. So the first thing is about entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship. Hello. Are you from Croatia as well? Wow, it's a long way to walk, isn't it? So the first thing about entrepreneurship is, everybody is excited about entrepreneurship today. And what is it? They're a little less clear about that. Yet as engineers, the first rule before you solve a problem is define your terms. So what I want to do is talk about, and I'll make all these slides available to you. I want to define what we mean by entrepreneurship, because often you'll hear people talking about entrepreneurship. On one side, you'll hear, when the last election here, Mitt Romney and Obama were both saying the word entrepreneurship, and they meant very, very different things. So what I'm going to think about entrepreneurship is the formation of a new venture that produces a product that could be a service that's replicatable. And a new venture is a new organization that creates some value. So there's some value created by this product, and you simultaneously extract some rent for the value that you created. So your product creates some sort of value, and you get paid economically. That makes your new venture sustainable. In other words, economic sustainability is very, very important here. Now, we could go and talk about is entrepreneurship more than that? Is it a frame of mind? Is it a skill set? And I'm moving more and more in our classes to do that. But when I did this presentation, it was more, how do you create a new venture based off a product that creates value and you extract value so it's economically sustainable? This is what most people understand it to be. So, but even with that definition, there are two major types of entrepreneurship. The first is often people refer to as SME, and governments often refer to SME and entrepreneurship as the same thing. Small, medium enterprise equals entrepreneurship. That is only one form of entrepreneurship. Small, medium entrepreneurship is about it's about restaurants, dry cleaners, IT service companies, someone who's doing something that will help a local market, that will service a local market. It might be right around this neighborhood we do something. That would be a small, medium enterprise. On the other hand, there's another thing that I'd like to refer to. It's innovation-driven enterprise, IDE entrepreneurship, and these are new ventures that would scale, and they would not go after a local market, but they would go after a global market. And this is a dramatically different type of business, yet we lump them together often. This is a Google, this is a restaurant, right? So here at MIT, we really focus on this side of the equation. How do you have products that are scalable, that can address many different markets, hopefully globally? Well, what's the difference between them? Well, if we look at it from a system standpoint, an SME is a linear system that responds very rapidly. It does not have a tremendous amount of inertia. In other words, I put money into this business, I get results back very, very quickly. I'm a dentist, I'm an SME, I'm a dentist, I have a business, and if I put one more chair in, I will get more revenue. If I'm a restaurant, I put one more table in, I get more revenue. If I'm a services company, I hire one more person, I immediately get more revenue, or almost immediately. In other words, the response time, the delta T, is very, very short here. You will grow linearly as you add that, and you do not require a tremendous amount of investment to do an SME. And oh, by the way, you will control that business. That you don't have to give up a lot of equity in this company either. On the other hand, if you do a systems analysis of an IDE, you will notice something different, that it will drop down. If I have a new product and I invest money into this business, most often, not all the time, but most often, I invest in some R&D, I invest in some sort of, development effort that produces a product that will ultimately give me growth, but initially I don't see any result. In fact, I see much less cash flow. It's not immediately good, those investments that you make in an innovation-driven. But once you get it, it goes up exponentially. So this system takes longer to respond. This system, however, when you get it, gives you exponential growth, but it requires a lot of investment, and it requires you being willing to give up ownership, some percentage of ownership of your company, and potentially control of your company. So Steve Jobs didn't have control of Apple from an equity standpoint, but every restaurant person has control over the restaurant if they're the owner of it. Not everyone, but you get what I'm going. Both of these are good. These, for an economy, are what you would call shovel ready. If you're going to do a stimulus package, you love to invest in these. Why? Because I'm a politician, I invest money in, I will see jobs created very, very quickly. I will see a response to that quickly. These are also very popular with politicians because they are geographically distributed. These are what you would call non-tradable jobs. On the other hand, these over here, you can put money in and you won't necessarily see results really quickly. You won't see that growth. These are also tradable jobs. They might be something that's good, but they're tend to be in clusters, and they might be more urbanized. They're not spread out the way society would like, unfortunately, today. So, but a good, healthy economy has both of these things. I'm going to focus on the development of these because this is what we study at MIT. Does this make sense to people? Because this is important. And if you're interested, there's a paper on this that's written that if you just let us know, we can send you that paper. You can just Google it up. It's called A Tale of Two Entrepreneurs. It's put out by the Kauffman Foundation. So I just defined entrepreneurship, but then I threw this word in here, innovation, which is thrown around all the time now. And again, I'm not sure that people really understand what innovation is, so I'm not going to take any risk here. I'm going to define innovation. So innovation is something new to the world that brings value. People often equate that with invention. Invention is a new to the world idea, technology, process, whatever you would like. Inventions cost you money. Innovation makes money for people. So there's something missing, that innovation doesn't equal invention. There's something else in this equation, and it's this thing called commercialization. And commercialization is taking an invention, new to the world idea, a new technology, a patent, a new process, and figuring out where does that apply to some customer to make them money, to create value. When I say customer, it could be a nonprofit. You get what I mean. So how do we apply this new idea that might come up in our labs, might have come up in our heads, we might have found in a patent search? How do we take that and commercialize it to create innovation? And this is an important equation, as simple as it is, because people often misrepresent, or mistake, I should say, innovation for just being all about invention, and it's not. It's not. Let me just make that point very clearly. The most innovative company in the world today is what? Google? Not really. Apple. Yeah, Apple. And if we look at Apple, Apple has consistently recreated new industries. And the Apple IIe was the first one, which was kind of that wasn't a real breakthrough. That didn't create Apple that we know today. It was the Macintosh that really created the Apple that we know today. That was the first step. And when you look at what the Apple computer, the Macintosh computer, which was predated by the Lisa computer, but that's another story. You know, the invention in the Macintosh computer was what? Does anybody know? What was the breakthrough idea in the Macintosh computer?
Graphical user interface.
The graphical user interface. It was the first computer that had pixels on the screen, and you had this thing called a mouse, and you could point at it, and there were icons called Windows Icon Mouse Pointer Interface. Was that Jobs or was that Wozniak who came up with that invention?
Xerox PARC.
Xerox PARC. And how'd that work out for Xerox PARC? Right. Xerox PARC was just bought probably 30 days ago by Fuji, and it no longer exists. On the other hand, Apple is arguably the most valuable public company in the world today. And it was based off initially an invention that came from somebody else that they could not commercialize. And it didn't stop there. The next breakthrough product they had was the iPod. And the iPod's fundamental underlying technology was what? No, it was not the flash drive. It was a technology called MP3. MP3 technology. And they used flash drive and all that, but that wasn't a breakthrough that they had. So it was MP3 technology. Was that Wozniak or was that Jobs who came up with that on the patent? I forget. Do you remember?
Jobs.
No, you're supposed to recognize the pattern here.
MP3 was
Xerox PARC.
That's a good guess, but that's not correct. Sorry?
MP3 was developed in Germany.
That's right. Who was it? Who was it?
Fraunhofer.
That's right, Fraunhofer. I can present in front of thousands of people. Where are you from? Are you from Croatia?
Croatia, yeah.
Yeah. It's a good bet in this room. But I will present in front of thousands of people and I will ask them that and no one will know that it's Fraunhofer. They will say creative arts. Some people will say Xerox PARC. But it is neither Wozniak nor Jobs. And when you look at this over and over again, this is what they did. And it came to the point where Jobs' has famous quote says, good artists create, great artists steal. Yes, that's what he said, right? And do you know that he wasn't the first one to say that either? Pablo Picasso said that quote first. So even his quotes he steals from other people, right? And the point here is that And when you look at Google, the breakthrough in Google is not the search engine algorithm. What is the breakthrough in Google? That's right. Who said that?
That's Croatia.
Yeah. Croatia's getting all the right answers here. But AdWords was not created by Google. It was created, do you know who it was created by?
Amateur.
That's right, Overture. Yeah, Overture. Bill Gross, you had to go Overture. And they took it and they commercialized that idea and they made billions out of it. And Overture did better than Xerox PARC or Fraunhofer out of their deals. But they still weren't the ones who got the lion's share of it because they didn't create the innovation. The point that I want to make is invention can't be zero, but you can get that from other places. If you want to create a lot of innovation, you get good at commercialization. And this is the story of MIT as well. MIT is a prolific company in bringing technology to market. And everybody believes it's because we get billions of dollars in research and development. That sure helps. That helps. But there are a lot of other places that get that kind of money too. And they don't create 1,000 new companies by their alumni per year. But MIT does, because MIT understands the commercialization side of this equation. And governments often way overinvest in invention and way underinvest in commercialization, as do companies often make that mistake. And if you wanted to make more money, you would get really good at commercialization, as did Apple. That's making you uncomfortable, sir. Is that correct? No. Are you from Croatia? He is from Croatia.
No.
Okay, so, but people get uncomfortable at that at MIT. They say, no, we're about, new to the world ideas. Yes, I love them too. But guess what? 1,000 new companies started a year. How many are started by technology that comes directly out of the labs at MIT? You want to guess? Take a guess.
30%.
5? 30%. So we know that number because the technology, they have to license it through the technology licensing office. And it's 20 to 30 companies per year come directly out of the laboratory. So 5 was a little low. You could say you meant 5%, and then you'd be right on. Less than 5% of the companies started by MIT alumni do not come from technology right out of the labs. They come from understanding what is good invention and how to commercialize it. What's going on at MIT is a transfer of knowledge about how to commercialize things that are good inventions, rather than the invention itself. You need both. If this is 0, you get no innovation. And if this is 0, you get no innovation either. So entrepreneurship is about the process of figuring out how to commercialize things. So when you look at successful and by the way, I am an entrepreneur first and foremost. I'm an accidental academic. So what you have is you have people who are focused on technology, and we could put invention here, but they like to call that innovation. And then you have people who are good at entrepreneurship. This is the business essentials. So what they know is how to develop science and technology to break through, how to develop it, how to build it. And on the other side, the business essentials are people who say, wait, who's the customer? How do we think about this? How do we go out and map customer needs to a product? So they know how to frame the decisions to get it started, to start it, and to grow it. And these two need to work together. But the key is not just to work once, but it's iteratively how often you can work together. So if we're starting a company together, and I'm the entrepreneur, and he's a technology person, he's also an entrepreneur, we're working together, and he'll say, I have this new breakthrough technology. It's a 3D haptic force feedback device. And I say, whoa, that's amazing. And I'll say, great. He said, what should I do? I said, don't do anything. Let me figure out who the customer is. So I'll go over here, say, what can we use this for? And we'll say, oh, you can use it for medicine. What would you use it for medicine for? Well, what kind of resolution do you need? Oh, this way. Do you have that kind of resolution? Let me find out. I'll ask him, what kind of resolution do we have? Well, I can have that resolution, but it'll cost this much. How much, can you pay this much? Well, I can't pay that much. Okay, but okay, you can pay that much. How big does it need to be? And so this back and forth between the inventor and the entrepreneur to figure out how do we make this into a product. This rapidity is what made Edison so successful as an innovator, and Tesla, even though he had more inventions, was not as good at bringing products to market. And Edison said his measure of innovation is how many times can you innovate on a new idea within the first 24 hours when you have it. So it's not just that you can go back and forth, it's the rapidity with which you can do this. So, everybody still with me here?
Yeah.
Do you want me to speak in Croatian?
Yes.
You can try.
No, okay, then I won't. I couldn't anyway, but I just want to seem polite. So I want to talk about, so that's what entrepreneurship is. I want to talk about misperception of what entrepreneurship is not, all right? The first thing is, people believe that entrepreneurs are mercurial individualists. You see this in the movies, you hear the stories about it, they're just ruthless, they're focused. This is not true. The first thing I want you to understand is entrepreneurship is a team sport. If you try to start a company by yourself, you are much less likely to be successful than someone who starts a company with 2 people. And someone who starts a company with 3 founders is more likely to be successful than someone with 2 or 1. All right? That doesn't mean if I just walk out the door and the first person I meet, I say, let's start a company and my odds have increased. It's a thoughtful way of developing a team to start a company. So entrepreneurship is about teams. It's about getting teams of people who have a common vision as to what they want to achieve. They trust each other, and then they have complementary skills. You have someone who's a business person, someone who's a technologist, someone who's good at, the kind of the design aspect of it, whatever else you need, but teams beat individuals over and over again. So it's not about individuals, it's about teams. Second thing is, entrepreneurs, despite what they will tell you, are not the smartest people, right? That is not a requirement. It's not people, I have one, now we're working, and he's so smart, and it's actually a disadvantage because the person's always analyzing, this is the option, this is the option. Entrepreneurship is about action. It's about doing things. And people who are like the highest grades and everything are actually much less likely to be entrepreneurs. You have to be really good at one thing and then be able to deselect all the other things. There are many things that don't correlate to that people think correlate to entrepreneurship that don't. Like we're going to talk about, is your parents entrepreneurs? That doesn't correlate to it. One thing that negatively correlates to entrepreneurship, and you won't want to hear this, is a PhD. If you have a PhD, doesn't mean you can't be an entrepreneur. You are less likely to be an entrepreneur because you're looking for one singular answer. And entrepreneurs keep moving forward, and they're okay with messiness, and they're okay with imprecision, and just keep moving forward and iterating on it. So entrepreneurs are not, it's not an intelligence test. It's not an intelligence test. Number 3, entrepreneurs are born, not made. You are born to be an entrepreneur. There's some DNA that makes you it's nature, not nurture. This is not true. The data bears out that people who become successful entrepreneurs, their parents weren't entrepreneurs. They try to correlate these different things. It's a team sport. Can you get people to work with you? One that I always used to happen, and I believed it too, was, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. This is just not true. This is not true. Every single one of you in this room could be an entrepreneur. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Even the ones with a PhD?
Even the ones with a PhD. You can overcome these issues. And let me tell you why. Because first of all, I've seen this in my classroom, but let me give you the point where it became so clear to me. First, let me tell you a story. One of my children came home one day and said, I just tried and I cannot learn Spanish. I am not wired to learn Spanish. It's impossible for me to learn Spanish. I'm just incapable of it. Everybody got that? You may have had one of your kids come home and tell you that. But think about that for a second. I said, you know, if you were born in a Spanish-speaking country, I guarantee you, you'd be speaking Spanish right now. It's not that you can't speak Spanish. You don't feel you need to speak Spanish. You don't want to speak Spanish. It's an inconvenience for you to speak Spanish. It's the same thing for entrepreneurship. Has anyone here been to Vietnam? Yeah. How many people in Vietnam are entrepreneurs? Everybody. If you have to be an entrepreneur, you become an entrepreneur. The only people who aren't entrepreneurs in Vietnam are the people who don't have to. I mean, everybody is out hustling. So if you needed to be an entrepreneur to survive, I guarantee you, just like my son would learn Spanish, you would learn how to be an entrepreneur. Now that doesn't necessarily make you a great entrepreneur, but you would learn how to do it. And then we've seen in our class, people who, oh, I could never be an entrepreneur. They come into our classes and they become entrepreneurs. And we'll talk about how that happens in a second. So it's not something that's for an elite small group of people. That's hogwash. And the data bears that out. This is another one. Entrepreneurs love risk. The reason why entrepreneurs are great is because they love risk. They love to gamble. This is not true. You know, I'm an entrepreneur. And how many of you seen the movie 21 about the MIT Blackjack team? Have any of you seen that? Yeah. So the MIT Blackjack team, they became entrepreneurs, almost all of them, by the way. And so they liked risk? No, they didn't really like risk. They understood how to take informed risk, to take intelligent risk. When you went into if you were on the MIT Blackjack team, you went into the casino and you played one game, and you played one game only. And what game was that? Blackjack. Why?
Because there's the lowest risk of all.
You have the best odds in blackjack, but your odds still aren't good enough, so you're crazy to go just play blackjack, except what?
Except if you count the cards.
Except if you count the cards. And the MIT Blackjack team, and if you count the cards, then guess what happens? The odds are in your favor. So the MIT Blackjack team would go into the casino, and they understood what to do. First of all, they would sit down, and then they would lay at a table, and they would start to play. And then they would sit down, and they would have a diverse team. They would have women on their team. And guess who would count the cards? The women would count the cards. Why? Focus. No, men can focus too. Maybe not in Croatia, but elsewhere.
They don't look suspicious.
That's exactly right. The people never expect the women to be the ones who are counting the cards. There's gender bias here. So the women count the cards, and now they know and they signal to each other what's going on. The odds are now in their favor. If they lose, no problem. In fact, this is good because now they're less suspicious. And now they build up and they keep playing. Why? Because over time, they know the odds are in their favor and they know they're going to win. That's what an entrepreneur is doing. We're always looking for ways to get risk that is very much worth it in the end. The odds are in our favor. We have an information disadvantage. We have some other disadvantage that will give us good odds. This idea that entrepreneurs fail all the time, that's not true. If you're an intelligent entrepreneur, over 50% of our entrepreneurs succeed. They're in business. The study by Ed Roberts showed 60%, right? So it's not as crazy if you're intelligent about entrepreneurship. None of the entrepreneurs I know, one of mine went to a casino and said, they gave me $300. I said, so what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to cash it and go home and spend it on my startup. I got a free hotel room at $300. This is great. I'm not going to go gamble it away. I'm going to go put it in my startup because I control the outcome in my startup. I don't control it if I go down and put it on a crazy thing like this. That's not what entrepreneurs are about. They're about taking intelligent risk. Entrepreneurs are successful because they're charismatic. If you've ever been to a party of entrepreneurs, you know this is just not true. And entrepreneurs, yeah, you want someone on your team that can sell, but if all you can do is you're a snake oil salesman, by that I mean you sell something to someone and it's not real value, they won't come back and you're not going to have a successful business. So you cannot just be charismatic. You have to produce real value because you have to produce more and more and more customers. You can't just sell. You can't just be a salesperson. You have to produce a real product with real value, because at the end of the day, the best salespeople you have are not the salespeople you hire. It's your own customers. And you need to count on that when you're a startup. So it's not about being charismatic. Entrepreneurs are lucky. That person's an entrepreneur and Elon Musk is just lucky. No, they're not lucky entrepreneurs. Again, they're taking informed risks. They figure out where the opportunity is. Where is that future opportunity? It's going to be in smartphones. It's going to be in blockchain. It's going to be in machine learning. And then they spend, as Malcolm Gladwell said in his book, 10,000 hours to get ready for that opportunity. So when that opportunity happens, they're there to take advantage of it. That's what entrepreneurs do. And then the last thing here of these is entrepreneurs are undisciplined. I'll just use, for example, I mean, this is crazy. People, oh, look at them. They dress funny. Well, if you had seen me at IBM, I used to work for IBM for 11 years. And every day I would go in with black wingtip shoes. I would have black socks. I would have a Brooks Brothers 42 long suit. And I would wear a white starched shirt with a red and maybe a blue tie if I was feeling a little crazy. And I would go in and I would be there by 8:30 in the morning, and I would never leave before 6 o'clock at night. And I would say all the right things in meetings, and I would never swear. It was just, I was so disciplined, or so it seemed. And then I did a startup, and I realized that none of that stuff mattered. The only thing that mattered was, did you get a product that the customer wanted, and the customer bought it and paid for it, and did you collect that money? Because if you didn't, we didn't make payroll. We didn't make payroll. And if you don't make payroll, you're out of business. At IBM, I never worried about that. I worried about things like, what do people think, like how I look at a meeting? How do I dress? Am I there on time? All that is appearances. All that's activity. What you care about is achievement. And that's what you get focused on in a startup. So when you see Steve Jobs, oh, look at him, he's crazy. Yeah, he doesn't care where, what he says at parties and things like that. But when he gets to work, oh my God, he was just laser focused on doing things. The self-discipline you must have to be a successful entrepreneur is so much higher than you have in a larger organization, because you must. If you don't survive. It's just simple Darwinian selection. So there are two other misperceptions I just want to deal with. I mentioned this one before, the entrepreneurs fail all the time. It's just 99% failure rate. I don't know exactly where these numbers come from, but they're kind of crazy, because even when you look at this book, and Malcolm Gladwell is not an academic, I understand, he's a storyteller, but he goes through, and have any of you read this book, David and Goliath? So when David beats Goliath, Goliath is enormous, and David slays him because he changed the rules. Goliath said, come out here and fight me. So all my advantages I can put on you because you're small. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go over here with a slingshot, and because you are so big, you make a big target for me, and I'm going to be able to hit you and bring you down. So the very strengths of Goliath became his weaknesses when David changed the rules. And he goes through and he says something like 60% or more of the time in military battles, when David, the underdog, changes the rules on the established player, they win the military battle. And this is what entrepreneurs do. The odds are not stacked against you as much as you would think. The next thing is, the most overrated thing in entrepreneurship is the original idea. People say, oh, I don't have a good idea to be a startup. Or Facebook is successful because of the original idea. Well, that's not true. Before Facebook, there was Friendster and there was MySpace. It wasn't an original idea. It was all about executing. Was Google an original idea? No. Was Elon Musk an electric car an original idea? No. These ideas have been around. What you have to do is take the original idea, and then there's research by Matt Marks that shows you start with an idea and then you figure out who's the customer, And then you figure out, wait a second, what product does that customer need? And you do this thing what he calls switchbacks, and then you end up with a successful company. And the biggest determiner is not the idea, it's did you figure out who was a good customer, did you have a process to execute against that, and did you have a very strong team? Those things are much more important. And those are the things that we need to emphasize when we educate people. So, last is entrepreneurship, to frame it, is not a science. It is not a science. In a science, if I do A and I do B, then I will get C, right? That's deterministic. If I do A and I do B, then I get C. But that's not the way entrepreneurship works. If I do A and I do B, all I can tell you is that I'm much more likely to get outcome C. That's all we can tell you because it's a really complicated system. So therefore, people say, aha, it is not a science. This is a science that's deterministic. It's not a science. Therefore, it must be art. No, it's not art. Art is something that's more obscure, not accessible to lots of people. That is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is accessible to people. It's like pottery. Entrepreneurship is like pottery. It's a craft. And by that I mean anybody can do it. Anybody in this room we could teach you how to make pottery. It might take a little while, but we could teach you how to do pottery. I don't know if I could ever teach you how to be a painter or an opera singer or something like that, right? You build things if you're a craftsman. If you're an entrepreneur, you're building things. And not only are you building things, you're building unique products that have never been built before. That's very similar to a craft. It's something that's learnable with first principles that exist to make you better at pottery. Here's how you use your thumbs. And people teach you those things in an apprenticeship mode. So there's an element of theory here, of first principles, and then you have to put it into practice and you go back and forth. Most things in life are crafts. Sports are a craft. So is entrepreneurship. The more we do entrepreneurship, the more likely we are to be successful. Why? Because we learn these first principles and we learn how to apply them. So this was important because it's not a science, but it's not an art. And once we understand this, now we understand how we should teach entrepreneurship like a craft in apprenticeship mode. So the purpose is, yes, you can. Yes, again, let's talk about how you do it. How do we do it here at MIT? And this has evolved over time. We do it through the 4H model, the 4H model. The first H of this is the heart. You cannot be a successful entrepreneur if you just follow the rules and you go along with everybody else. You must be willing to be different. If all the fish are swimming this way, are you willing to swim that way? Are you willing to be different? Because entrepreneurship is doing something that's never been done before. So not only are you willing to swim that way, do you enjoy swimming the other way? Do you enjoy being different? And this is why MIT is good, because MIT is a culture of hackers that are willing to be different. So we talk about the pirate culture here. And then the second one is the head. All right, so you see the pirate. It's more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. The second H is the head. So we start with the heart. It all has to start. If you don't believe you can be an entrepreneur, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. If you can't believe you can, you understand the journey, then you can be. The next thing we need to teach is the head, the principles. What are those first principles that you need to know to be an entrepreneur? And once we give you those, that's not enough. That's just knowledge. Now you have to learn how to apply those in a way that creates capability, that creates real-world impact. Knowledge is just in your head. Hands are when you actually do something. So the bird sings from within. You have to want to do it, then you have to know what to do, and then you have to be able to do it. That seems to be all that you should need to know to be an entrepreneur, but it isn't. If you want to really create a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, an area, the last H is called home. It's a community. When I worked at IBM, we didn't have to go outside IBM because of all our resources. But entrepreneurship is about utilizing resources that you do not control. And so being a successful entrepreneur, you have to learn how to be part of community to give to other people and to get other things back. because you are a small fish and you might be growing, but this is it. This is why entrepreneurs are so efficient. In today's world, this idea of community is much, much more important. In the old days, the big behemoth companies, you did not have to worry about this. So to be a successful entrepreneur starts from the heart. Do you understand what to do? Are you willing to be different? Do you know what to do? Can you do it? And can you be part of a community to not just get the emotional support, but the contacts, the networkings that you need, the knowledge to test, the ability to run experiments. All this is critically important. So this is the spirit I talked about, willing to be different, creative irreverence. We call it hacking at MIT, but hacking makes other people very nervous. This is where our logo you see right here, but it's more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. That's what we espouse to our students, and we encourage them. If you get a chance, you can walk through our center, and you'll feel that the moment you walk in. Did you feel that today, Sean?
Yes.
And there were pirate flags up there. This is an important part of MIT and why MIT is so successful. For those of you who don't know, MIT has been as the school of the immigrants and immigrants' kids. If you want to be the school of the elite, that's down the street. That's called Harvard. That was knowledge for knowledge's sake, training people who are going to be government officials, lawyers. No, this is people who are immigrants and immigrants' kids. There's no honorary doctorates. You have to earn what you get here. And that's what entrepreneurship is. It's a meritocracy. So we are constantly at MIT looking to overturn the existing system and change it around. And that's what makes us such a fertile ground for entrepreneurship. But it's not enough to just have the spirit of a pirate. You have to also have the skills. And so to have the spirit of a pirate is insufficient. You also have to have these execution skills of a Navy SEAL to be a successful entrepreneur. And this is the whole point of disciplined entrepreneurship. So we talked about these things and we went through. Now let me just tell you what we do in disciplined entrepreneurship, and then I want to leave time for it. So what we did in disciplined entrepreneurship is we said, how do we teach people to be entrepreneurs? Different than the way that it's being taught today. And let me just step back for a second and say entrepreneurship is a complicated system. You're trying to build something that's never been done before. If you were trying to build a house, which is a complicated system but not dynamic like a startup, you would never build a house with just one tool. That would be crazy. You would get a toolbox and you would have many different tools in your toolbox. And you would use the appropriate tool at the appropriate time. However, when it's come to entrepreneurship, there has not been a rigorous body of knowledge, and people get obsessed with one tool. And when you look at it, whatever the book is that's the hot book of the time becomes this is the key to entrepreneurship. And I know some of you have taught entrepreneurship here and you know this. It was crossing the chasm at one point. It was blue ocean at another point. Oh, no, now it's a lean. No, now we need to pivot. Now we need canvases. Wait, what is it? I don't understand. What happened to the blue ocean? I thought I kind of liked that one. And so the point here is that if we want to have a serious discipline of entrepreneurship, there have to be fundamental first principles that are proven out and validated. And then those need to go in the toolbox. If somebody comes along with a new one, let's put it in the toolbox, and maybe it replaces another tool, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to use. And these are curated and kind of validated through the rigor of academia. And so we looked at this as, how do you break down entrepreneurship? First, you have to have a nucleation. What is entrepreneurship? How do you come up with ideas? How do you build the initial team? What soft skills do we need? And then how do we define the product? How do we figure out the product market fit? How do we come up with the ability to do primary market research that tells us what's really going on in the market? What's the right problem to solve? Not the problem we think is to solve. And then how do you come up with a strategy that's scalable? And then once you have a product, you don't have a company, now you have to build out the whole venture. And so there's a whole bunch of other modules over here that you need to do. And so each of these is what I'm programming. So this is object-oriented programming, each one of these objects. So then you can link together based on your situation, I want this, and then you have what you want from an entrepreneurship education. I'm going to focus right here on the product market fit because that's what I have. There's just an article, we have primary market research, we're doing an online course on this, and Scott Stern just had an article in Harvard Business Review about this tile. But there's been work by Noam Wasserman, who was at Harvard Business School, and is now at University of Southern California on some of the other ones. But let me just talk about product market fit. And so we built a toolbox to help you get product market fit. And this is what it looks like. And you say, oh my God, why are there so many steps? I thought you could make this easy for me. And we cannot make it easy for you, sorry. Entrepreneurship is not easy. If you think it's easy, then you have the wrong thing. It's really hard, but it's really, really rewarding when you learn how to do it. So we're just making an approximation with 24 steps, and it's not a straight line. It's a kind of winding path where you have to iterate lots of it. But the good news is there's a starting point and there's an ending point, and then we break it down into different themes. And the first theme that we start with is, who is your customer? You don't start with a product, you don't start with a technology. You start by saying, who is the customer, and then building everything back from the customer. This is not something new. This is design thinking. This is what Procter & Gamble has been doing forever. This is what I experienced in my companies, and most people have been doing. Who is your customer, and what's the problem you're solving, or what's the opportunity? Understand the demographic, psychographic of what they're doing. Build a persona, know how big the market is, choose one market, don't try to do it for all markets. This is essential entrepreneurship 101. Who's your customer? And we just take all that, we condense it down, and we give you very systematically how to do it. So these are the first tools that you're going to use at the beginning of your journey. The next tools are, what is the value that you create for your customer? What is the value that you create for your customer? And that starts with the context, the full life cycle use case. Again, Clayton Christensen at Harvard's done work in Jobs to be Done. There's a whole bunch of other work on this as well, Eric von Hippel. Then what's your product? And don't build the product, build a high-level specification, because now we got to figure out what value does it create. And then we're going to validate that with 9 more customers. And then we're going to figure out what makes us unique and chart our competitive positioning. And then after that, by the way, at this point, a lot of my students say, we're done. We know who our customer is, and we have created value for them. Now they will buy our product. And you say, no, that's not the real world. What happens now is you have to sell the product. The customer needs to acquire it, because if they don't acquire it, there's no value created. And so now we go into basic, again, stuff of like, what's the decision-making unit? Who's the end user? Who's the economic buyer? Who's the champion? Who influences all those people? Again, not new stuff, but it's just systematically broken down so that entrepreneurs know how to use it in a concise manner and build it back up. So who makes the decision? How do they make the decision? And then we then look at this and say, what is the unit economics if we were to build this product? That is, how are we going to extract rent for it? How are we going to price it? And then how much is each new customer worth to us? Lifetime value of a new customer, all right? Then once we know the lifetime value, then we can figure out what channel we use to put it out to our customers. And we can do all this stuff because we understand who's making the decision and how they're making the decision. So now we can figure out, should we do a one-time charge? Should we do a subscription model? Should we do a consumables model? Should we do a cell phone model? Should we do a freemium to premium? Should we resell the data? There's lots of options here, but we don't know which one to choose until we know who's making the decision and how they make it. Then we know what price. Now we can estimate what the lifetime value is. This is not precise here. This is best guess. But once we know our customer is going to be worth about $100,000, now we know here we can actually hire salespeople to go out and sell this stuff. If our customer is worth $1,000, you cannot hire salespeople. You have to use sales bots. You have to have call centers at best to do, digital marketing, email marketing, and things like that. If your customer is only worth $25, that's very, very hard. But guess what? If you know your customer is worth $25 and you use no humans in the loop, you can make a really great business. That's called Google. That's called Facebook. That's what they do. But you can't make informed decisions unless you know how much a new customer is worth. And once we choose this the sales channel, then we figure out what our cost of customer acquisition is in the short, medium, and long term, and now we know if the unit economics are going to make sense for our business. And now, lo and behold, we build the product. We do not build the product up front for many reasons, which you can read about in my piece that I wrote, Our Dangerous Obsession with the Minimum Viable Product, which is in TechCrunch. It's just a bad idea to build a product before you know who your customer is and your unit economics and your sales channel. So this is an example. I could go on in this. There's books on this that you could do. This is our customer journey of how we go through to take our students from their heart to actually their mind, and then getting their hands, and then building community, and then they achieve escape velocity, and they're very successful, and they go out and conquer the world, and then we bring a new class in and do it the next year. All right. I don't have much time. When are we over? At 6 o'clock? Okay, rapid fire questions. No questions? Let me ask you a question. Was this a great presentation or the greatest presentation ever?
Greatest ever.
That was bad market research. That was a poor survey design. Yes?
You said you were an entrepreneur. What do you do?
What do I do? I'm an accidental academic now. I teach entrepreneurship. What I want to do now, I worked at IBM for 11 years. I did 3 companies. First one, very unsuccessful. Lost money. I spent money on it. Second one was pretty successful, looked more successful than it was. Third one went from 50 million to $500 million in 2.5 years. And what I did, I didn't get any smarter. I got dumber, because that's what happens to old guys. But I understood the process of entrepreneurship. And so what I do now is I help young people not make the same mistakes that I did. And my goal is to create a discipline of entrepreneurship so we can have millions of good entrepreneurs out there. Because today our problem is, all of us face this problem, is the world needs, has a lot of intractable problems, be it healthcare, be it education, be it climate change, be it, you name it, jobs. Those problems are not going to be solved by Donald Trump, right? Those jobs are not going to be solved by any government. They're not going to be solved by big corporations. They're going to be solved by the human spirit of creativity and energy that comes from entrepreneurs. It always has been that way. And just, by the way, that's where the jobs are going to be in any case. So I want to produce, my goal in life is to help produce entrepreneurs. Does that answer your question?
Sure did.
I'm much older than I look too. I'm 60, so. Thank you.
Did you pay?
You thought I didn't look a day over 79. That's right. Yes, sir.
Do you have any example of creating value, but not without economic sustainability?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of those. You can go out and look at online. One is Groupon. Groupon had an unsustainable business model. Their cost of customer acquisition was higher than the lifetime value of their customers. You might think Groupon brought no value to the world, which is fine. But Pets.com did the same thing, where their lifetime value was, let's say, $100, but to acquire a customer was $200.
But some examples that are often quoted are, like Steve Jobs. He designed his MP3 and iPod 3 because he wanted it, creativity and all. I don't think he was concerned about economic sustainability.
Yeah, I know this is being recorded, but let me just say there's an academic term for that. It's called bullshit. Because that's what he did with the next computer. And the next computer didn't work. And Steve Jobs, despite what he would say, realized that that was not a way to succeed. And he did not ask the customer to design the product. It is not the customer's job to design the product. That's your job. But your job is to understand the customer deeply, deeply, what they need, what the opportunities are. And Steve Jobs really, really understood that people wanted to carry around something that had 1,000 songs in their pocket. And that wasn't just for him. He understood there was a mass market out there because he had learned from the mistakes at Next not to just believe his own, his own BS. That's how you end up with a Segway. Now, Steve Jobs said a lot of things, but you have to understand what he actually did. Don't listen to what people say, look at what they did. He understood exactly what customers, no, not exactly. He listened very, very carefully and had a keen understanding of customers' needs, and then he designed the product. This is kind of entrepreneurs making themselves more glorious than they are. Don't listen to the customers. I know what to design. That's rubbish. That's rubbish. You've got to understand what the customers want. People who design products for themselves, there's a long history of those not working. Now, you could design a product for yourself, and it might work. But guess what? You could also become a millionaire by buying a lottery ticket. It's just not very likely to happen, right? So I don't mean to be so aggressive, but I heard this thing, and I also knew people who work for Jobs, and he was broken after Next because he actually believed what he said, and he did it there, and Next was a massive, colossal failure. It wasn't until he got back and he learned from that. By the way, the point there is as well as the best teacher in life is not success. The best teacher in life often is failure. As long as you don't like failure and you must win, you learn from it, right? I'm not saying love failure. Failure is not a wonderful thing. It's a terrible thing.
And it supports my hypothesis that, they say, look at the history, you can learn a lot, but unfortunately, you can never understand what history is like. This example that you gave.
Yeah.
Don't listen to what he said. What he did, or different people will interpret differently.
Yeah, no. I also had the fortune, there's a movie called Silicon Cowboys that I'm in, and I happened to be around this whole space at the time. So I can give you a lot of color into this stuff. Yeah. It's not that I dislike humans. Some of my best friends are humans, but they say the stupidest things. I mean, you have to look at the incentives of the system and understand it. Sean, thank you for coming.
Thank you, man.
We'll see you in Malaysia. Yes?
How do you control risk when you are young and you don't have a very strong financial support? What's the advice to go for an entrepreneur career if you don't have the financial support to give the jump?
So first of all, it's easier when you're younger than when you're when you get older, because you actually have more financial things on you. So I don't like people dropping out of school to become entrepreneurs, but I do like people getting entrepreneurial experiences when they're at school, because you can get a lot of that out of the way. So for me, my first company was called Cambridge Decision Dynamics. That was not successful, but I did that after I graduated from school, and I learned so much in that year and a half, 2 years. I should have done that when I was here at MIT. And so to your point, my goal now is to have people learn how to do their first company here and within the academic environment where the risks are lower, and then they get to the second one where the odds are higher, because you don't really know what you're doing the first time. So my advice to you is try to start when you're in school. Don't drop out of school. Do it as what we call in the United States a side hustle, but try it and understand it. And when you're on breaks, go to do it. But as your burn rate is much lower at this point. And if you learn stuff, let me tell you, people want to hire entrepreneurs. They love entrepreneurs. I could spend all my time working with big companies who want to become more entrepreneurial. The future is people who can perform, entrepreneurially. By that I mean not just starting new companies, but people who can work in uncertain environments with where failure happens, and they have imprecise data, and things are changing, and there's crisis. Those are entrepreneurs. There's a great book called, well, it's not a great book, but it's a great concept called Anti-Fragile. And that's what we really want to try to create. So do it while you're in school. That would be my advice. Yes?
From your personal...
Are you from Croatia as well?
No, I'm...
Yes!
So
are you from MIT?
Yeah.
What course?
I'm taking your class.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I was in the New Ventures class.
Oh, great.
Last year, though.
Yeah.
I'm from the Technology and Policy program.
Yeah.
So my question is, from your personal experiences, or your observations of all the companies that spawned out of my MIT, do you think going to first of all work in bigger companies and get experiences will actually help you start up, or how important are the experiences?
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. So the question is, do you think working in a big company, a big organization, can help you to be a successful entrepreneur later? Is that fair?
Yeah.
And the answer, I believe, is yes. I worked at IBM for 11 plus years, and it was incredibly helpful to me because startup companies don't have money for training. And the hardest thing in a startup is not, does the technology work? The hardest thing in a startup is getting people to follow you, to get people to do things, to build an organization. It's about people. And at IBM, I got trained to do that. How do you hire people? How do you fire people? How do you motivate people? How do you develop people? How do you build organizations? And you don't get taught that. So I believe that is extremely valuable thing to learn. And I used to encourage my students to go work in large companies. And one day said to me, "You shouldn't be doing that. You're the professor of entrepreneurship. You shouldn't be telling me that." And he said, "Oh, okay, I won't." But and he said, "Thank you." And his name was Freddie Karras, and he started a company called Okta, and Okta is worth $4.3 billion now. So people can have different paths. He didn't need to go work in a big company after that. But there are benefits to that. And if you're not ready, you shouldn't start a company until you have a team, until you have something that you can really get, not just passionate about, but as Brad Feld says, obsessed with. I really want this to work. I really feel strongly about this. What the French would say, a great raison d'etre, that the world needs this organization. The world is going to be better off because this organization exists. Well, thank you all for coming out. And hopefully you can take something back to Croatia and make entrepreneurs in Croatia. So thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it.